the mighty and resilient Merrimack River, carving through the communities of our great region. My name is Linda Lorden, proud president of Merrimack County Savings Bank, and like the river that serves as our namesake, we're a constant yet ever-changing presence. Because to us, it's bigger than banking. It's about powering communities and putting people first. It's about knowing where you came from and where you're going. That's Merrimack style. Visit us at themerrimack.com.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast and are not intended to malign any religion, group, club, organization, business, individual, anyone, or anything. I'm Sarah Edmondson.
And I'm Anthony, air quotes nippy, Ames.
And this is A Little Bit Culty, a podcast about what happens when things that seem like a great thing at first go bad.
Every week, we chat with survivors, experts, and whistleblowers for real cult stories told directly by the people who lived through them.
Because we want you to learn a few things we've had to learn the hard way.
Like, if you think you're too smart to get sucked into something culty, you're already prime recruitment material.
You might even already be in a cult.
Oops. You better keep listening to find out.
Welcome to Season 6 of A Little Bit Culty. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of A Little Bit Culty. Time to buckle up, ALBC babies. We are about to go all over the map through Hollywood, the music industry, Australia, and a couple of decades of cult hopping. In fact, it's so epic that, picture this, we are holding an invisible boombox over our heads outside your window while blaring Peter Gabriel, asking you to listen. You got the picture? Okay, cool.
Our guests today are married to each other. She's Hollywood royalty and an ex-teen idol. He's a prolific indie pop musician from Australia. And well, would you say they're weirder together?
Definitely.
They weren't weird, so they got to be weirder together. The duo spent a good many years cult chasing and experimenting with Peruvian ayahuasca, which I wouldn't mind. Not right now.
Not right now. Maybe one day. Between them, they've studied Taoist Qigong, Jewish mysticism, and have been followers of Sakti Narayani Yama, the Hindu guru who married them in 2008.
And since 22, they've co-hosted a podcast together to talk about marriage, music, and whether or not to share their TM mantras. Any guesses who these two might be?
Anyone? Bueller.
Bueller's a reference to Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Bueller. Only my favorite movie of all time.
Yeah. Did you know that the Peter Gabriel song wasn't the original song?
Didn't know that.
Yeah.
Lots of cultiverse Easter eggs in this one, from David Lynch to QAnon to doTERRA, Theranos, Sean Penn, Rick Rubin, and beyond. If you're a cult nerd, this will be one of Mother's Milk. Put on your New Year's jammies and enjoy.
Without further ado, Ben Lee and Ione Skye.
Hey, Ben and Ione.
Hi.
Hey there.
Welcome to A Little Bit Culty. Finally.
Well, we're excited. Yeah, it's always good to connect with people that have, walked similar journeys or crossed paths on this weird terrain.
Absolutely. Although you two managed to not go quite as deep into your culty experiences, and we want to know how you figured it out sooner.
It's all relative too. Yes, but
that's true.
Sure, we can.
That's true.
Very true. Very true. It's case by case, and yes.
But for our listeners who don't know how we all connected, it was actually Jess, our producer, early on of A Little Bit Culty, sent me a screenshot of a tweet that you made, Ben, calling out QAnon. So that's how you got on our radar as a guest, which is really cool.
Yeah, that was kind of an interesting period where I think I had completed this sort of chapter of exploration of the dark arts.
Yes.
At this part of my life. And then I sort of saw it bubbling into a type of crossover with politics and mainstream consciousness and the Republican Party and all this stuff. And I was like, damn, this is like the same stuff going on. So it just felt like if you'd been through those dynamics, it was a good moment to call it out.
Absolutely.
So when you say it creeping in, what exactly, what sent your red flags up? Because I think that's important for people to get kind of...
I was going to ask how they're doing first. How are you?
I like to get in
Let's
there
talk
right
about
away.
deep state. No,
Yeah.
we've been really enjoying listening to your podcast. We get caught up on your life outside of culty behavior. How are you? How's life in Los Angeles? What's new?
It's pretty good. I mean, we lived for a year in Australia, and it did feel like the world was going berserk, and it was sort of an interesting moment to see how would it be living outside of America for a bit, and it was kind of amazing. But we've come back, and everything is good. You know, it's a lot of parenting and a lot of working, and it's fun. We've started working together on doing our podcast, which has been kind of great. But yeah, it's sort of like same but different to before we lived in Australia for a year. But everything's cool. We got the daughter. We have, a daughter.
We
And
got the daughter.
got the daughter and then
Check.
his stepdaughter, my older kid.
Yeah.
But it's okay. It's okay.
What year were you in Australia? Just this last year?
No, we went at the very end of 2020 and spent 21 there. It was kind of interesting because when we went there before the Delta variation, they were actually doing a really good job of keeping COVID out of Australia. So we went there as sort of this promised land of everything was open and there was no COVID. And then once it mutated a bit, they just couldn't do it. So we ended up going sort of from lockdown to lockdown. But, these are the lessons in life. There's no running away.
But it was beautiful to be there and have our kids see his side of his growing up in childhood.
Right.
And it's so beautiful over there.
Yeah, I think just getting your feet on the land is part of your heritage. Like, for Goldie, it's in her, and she hadn't had that experience of an extended period of like being in the ocean and just being connected to the country.
Ours is a similar thing, yeah.
Well, Nippy brought me to Atlanta for those same reasons. Feeling the land of the Georgian Southern football playing craziness.
That's not all it is. There's other things here. There's
crazy.
other things here besides football play.
It's Meshugas. I mean, talk about culty. Football, it's a whole other episode.
Oh, right.
Yeah, no, it is.
I just would love to see you two attend, not that your daughters will play football. I mean, they could, but it's unlikely you'll ever have to attend like a football game of young children.
That is a reasonable guess. You use the powers of intuition, and I think you correctly appraised our daughter's interests.
I mean, LA, there's a lot of basketball. And I mean, of course, Australia's got the football, but the footy, that's a whole thing that was really funny to me because there's like 10 different leagues of so many different types of playing and learning all of them. And some are very strange, the rules, right? And
I mean, you were definitely, it was pretty fun seeing it through your eyes. You had no idea what was going on. So that's always enjoyable.
But there's something relaxing about watching sports. I mean, I guess it's exciting for people too, but I don't know, it's just a different part of your brain and stuff. So it's kind of good. I can get into it.
I'm definitely using a different part of my brain. But speaking of Australia, I didn't realize this till I read your intake form, Ben, that you had, and then we're jumping like to the end. We'll go back to the beginning in a moment, but that you helped Bonnie Peace exit Nexium. Did you know each other from Australia?
So I first met Bonnie, when she first got to LA through my friend Spencer Sassa. And there's a pretty good network of Australians in LA who sort of stay in touch with each other and help each other. Mm-hmm. And it's a bit different now because of the way the cycle of television shows and stuff goes, where it used to be like pilot season, where the actors would come for pilot season. And so, everyone sort of knew each other. And Bonnie, I stayed in touch with, was friendly with, not super close. We'd sort of meet up for coffee over the years. I did come to some kind of intro pitch session for the one of the Nexium things they had in Laurel Canyon.
You did?
Yeah, we both came to that. It was some intro thing. And she called me a couple times. And it was funny because we were sort of both in cults. It's funny when you're friends and you're in different cults and you kind of like the ultimate prize would be like recruiting someone from one cult into your cult.
Totally.
But I think as I became more vocal about having really put all of that behind me, it created some interesting conversations with people like Bonnie who were like, Bonnie, I think intellectually and emotionally had already left, but Mark hadn't. So she was kind of calling for just we had a few chats of just support and kind of camaraderie of what it takes to actually wait through that process with somebody and when it's possible and when it isn't, and how you have to you sort of have to release your attachment to anyone exiting something like that because you can't control it. It's going to happen if it's going to happen. So yeah, anyway, and then Mark actually directed a music video for a project I had. I mean, they're people that have been sort of in and out of our lives for a long time.
I wonder, do you remember who did the intro session in Laurel Canyon? Like, was it Mark?
I mean, Mark, yeah, he did it.
Yeah, Mark.
And then they would occasionally call me about like acting.
Mark was trying to get you into some acting workshop.
Oh, that was also Nexium. You know that, right?
Yeah. But it's funny when you're in your own thing, you think your cult is the best. And you just think, oh, they're so misguided. Ours is really the best. But then, yeah. And I was sort of more on the end of waiting for Ben to get out of his last one, which was good when you did.
I think that the Nexium stuff didn't. I've always liked things that are a bit more wild,
right?
And I think because the Nexium thing was more connected to like self-improvement and like it was connected to that business leadership side. Yeah. It was like for my taste, it was a bit square. Like I liked
totally,
I liked colorful and psychedelics and like
you're right.
So it just didn't speak to my personal need to give up my autonomy. I needed a different pitch,
Totally.
Well, you weren't. Once you went in, you would have been accepted.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But,
I could get on board with
the
anything.
surface part didn't seem.
Yeah, the aesthetic didn't click for me.
You know what? So funny you said that. The aesthetic really never clicked for me either. But there were other things I liked about it. Obviously, staying for 12 years, but. Just from our 10 minutes together so far, you would have not liked the 5-day. You would have been like, peace out from day one. Because it was very...
sitting in a room.
Yeah, it was also a very cheesy aesthetic. Like it needed to be updated. And it always needed to be updated.
Yeah.
And I was always pushing on that. And they were like, yeah, that's just your superficial... It's just my issue. Like I'm too superficial or whatever. I'm like, there's people that are not going to like these sashes and the business part of it. Like executive success programs is not going to speak to an artistic... wild aesthetic, which is so much of it.
You got to hand it to Nexium. The volleyball crossover was one of the best cult sport crossovers that I've seen. The guy, did you watch Holy Hell?
Yes.
You know the guy from Austin?
Yeah.
Ballet.
That guy had the best swimsuit cult crossover.
Oh my God.
I think you each got to just find something unique. It's hard to stick out in the cult landscape.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he had a few power moves.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, we also were in Austin and we were talking to a couple of people who had been in that.
Yeah.
And then the documentary came out.
We had Will Allen, who directed Holy Hell. That movie actually was one of the first things that we saw that we were like, holy shit, we were in a cult because
I was horrified.
Because the parallels were so similar. Ballet.
But for you guys, was that the only cult you've been in, Nexium, or was it a progression of experimentation?
For Nippy was his only. For me, I had dabbled. I had been peripheral to other things now that I know going back. Like I went to a summer camp that I think was super dogmatic and culty. It wasn't necessarily a cult. Same one that Seth Rogen went to, by the way, who's written and spoken up a lot about that particular.
Oh, so it was like a more like hardcore Zionist?
Yeah, it was Zionist, socialist, Jewish youth movement. Like if I sent my kids to a summer camp and knew they were coming back with dogma, like regardless whether you agree with the dogma or not, like that's just not what camp should be for, in my opinion. But it was a youth movement. Like that was a big part of it. And then I would did a little bit of Bikram yoga. Like I didn't ever become a teacher or anything. I did an acting program that I got out of because I then found it was a little bit culty and has since turned out to be like legit culty. But I never went deep into any of these things because I didn't like them. I thought they were too culty and ended up in Nexium. So, the shoe eventually fit. But yeah, that was my only main one that I got dedicated to anyway.
It's interesting when you realize that, so you were looking for something that you were going to go all in on something sooner or later.
Yes.
And I think that's I relate to that. Like for me, part of the reason I progressed through different groups was that they weren't intense enough for me. And I was actually looking for me, it was almost like a Rambo, systematic derangement of the senses. I wanted something that was going to twist my mind completely. And I hit endpoints with some of them before, and then you realize you're in all the way, and it's like, okay, I see it.
Tell us, because our audience doesn't know, you've done 4. You've been in and out of 4. And normally our questions are like, how did you get in?
Wait, 4 or 3?
Was it 4? Well, I mean, I was sort of in a Qigong, really 3, I think.
Okay, we'll narrow it down to 3.
Yeah.
Still respectable.
Exactly. It did a good showing. Yeah, I was in a Qigong kind of group in New York and they sort of each led to each other. That's what's interesting. And it was Taoist and it was based on kind of just like high energy.
Was that the first one?
Yeah. So there was like no morality in that group. It was more like there's either energy, high energy or low energy.
Right.
And that then led me into explorations of things that had a like intense charge to them. And then I ended up with this Hindu guru, and that's who married us.
Right.
So I was there for like, I don't know, 5-6 years, back and forth to India,
Ooh.
dedicating albums to the guru. I mean, all that.
And running everything by various, the guru, like to marry me. And also just everything gets, it becomes more and more isolating, like any of them where you think you've got the answer with this person. They're communicating with something bigger. You're running everything, and to sit with the gurus, like, it's the devotional thing.
Mhm.
And it just becomes everyone else is sort of doesn't have what you have. The chosen
Yeah.
people.
The chosen people.
But I was in and out. I would go and think, oh, this is, a person. This is not an avatar. And then sometimes I would get completely swept up in it.
You'd had your own whole thing for coming from Kundalini and everything.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that.
Well, when I was married really young, and then when we separated, I think I was looking for something which I didn't realize. I just went to Gurmukh. This teacher had a class from her house. I went with a friend, and Gurmukh was like, I'm going to India. Gurmukh was really with Yogi Bhajan, like one of the early Kundalini teachers. And so we went to India with Gurmukh alone, like newly divorced, just very wide open. And doing the Kundalini yoga was very, a big experience for me. But I was very observant of the Sikhs, like, are they homophobic? Are they like really watching? And the children all went to school out there in India. And I was sort of hanging with the kids, like, is this good? Do they like it? Just really paying attention to, all the rules around being a Sikh. But I did get like really into it. I didn't become.
You hung out with, what's his name?
Yogi Bhajan. Well, I did they did these 3-day things in New Mexico, whatever they're called, tantric yoga. And Yogi Bhajan came to that. But yeah, I got really involved, but I didn't become a Sikh. But looking back, that was kind of, I was doing the meditations and all the practices. But until the one that we were, the Indian guru, that was kind of intense.
Yeah, that led me to the sort of ayahuasca, Gnostic Christian occult, madness. That was really like the breaking point where that was the first time I actually felt that my spiritual explorations were like negatively affecting my family, my parenting.
How so?
I'd say the number one thing was that there was a lot of emphasis on what was called sacred sexuality. It was these old Gnostic Christian, tantric, sort of hodgepodge of material, but it was very much about sex being part of the path to enlightenment and should be treated as such. And in a way, because my stepdaughter was a teenager, and I'm a natural sharer too. Like if I'm into music, I'm like, everyone's got to hear about it. If I discover it, so I'm talking about everything. And I just think I was telling the kids about some of these concepts that they needn't have ever really heard about, let alone have a dogmatic attitude to things like as delicate as sexuality when you're a teenager.
I mean, this was like holding the energy and not, I don't know.
Like no orgasming, basically, was like the general.
Yeah.
Which was super annoying for me. I was just like,
it's like having sex almost every day and not having orgasm.
I don't know.
That's a red flag.
Too fanatical.
But the bigger thing was that I think the reason that all these groups and churches control their participants' sexuality is because once you can control someone's sexuality, you can control anything about them. I mean, that is sexuality and creativity to me are the same thing.
And morality and the whole thing that most of these groups, the thing of like, you have to really work on yourself. And the only way to do it is do the things that the group says you should do. Right. And you have that total self-conscious thing of like, working on yourself and all the egos and all the things. And it's just like, what a nightmare.
That's such a red flag, I think, with all these groups. Is like there's so much like there's usually some other mission, some transcendental mission about changing the world or healing the world or peace or whatever. But there's like so much internal work and then so much like self-loathing or like too much introspection. And like, that's a real inconsistency I see as a through line.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that to me is like the first major red flag is anyone claiming to have any special information.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just think we, as humans, we all have various gifts and different types of insights and different charisma, different qualities. But in general, I think we all have access to exactly the same information. And I'm just very skeptical of people that position themselves, even in a social way or a political way, as having like special access to insight. Because I think we're all working with the same stuff and we're all humans. And I just think it's a real way to get in and manipulate people because we're scared, you know? Like I'm essentially like a good student. Like I grew up believing like I want to learn the right way to do things and do them well. And I'm susceptible to someone telling me, hey, I've got the right way to do it. You know, you got to hear this band. It's the best band. You got to try this restaurant. It's the best restaurant.
Totally.
You got like I'm susceptible to that. So if you tell me I've got the way to live life, I've got the one way, people don't know about it, I'm fully susceptible to that. So I've become very skeptical of it, but I wasn't initially.
I'm curious about the ayahuasca. How was the ayahuasca leveraged? Was that used to get you to explore more? What was it? And then separate ayahuasca from the actual cultic abuses. What's your take on it?
Well, before doing the ceremonies, which I was like terrified of actually, because once you become a parent, so controlling and in a good way though. Like I also just at a certain age, you're like, I just kind of want to be in control and like be, but I'm so competitive and Ben was going down such a journey. I made myself do the ayahuasca. But so this charismatic leader who was, of course, just presented as a teacher, but I never liked this guy. Whereas the adorable Hindu guru was like adorable. Like it was hard not to love Amma, the guru in India in a way. But this ayahuasca person, he was very charismatic and very eloquent, wonderful at talking about things. It was like taking the best college course on, philosophy and Gnosticism. And it was just like, he was very talented at what he was doing. But so, you tell people all this stuff. I mean, different cults do it in different ways, like sleep deprivation or whatever. But imagine someone's doing an hour-long,
lecture about like details of the Gnostic Gospels and like the archons and all the layers of, and then you take a psychedelic.
Yeah.
You're going to have it be informed by what you've been sitting and listening
to.
And
then you're studying. And of course, they have 5-day intensives that I didn't go to. And my friend said to me, once Ben goes, say goodbye, because it's 5 days in Shasta doing ayahuasca every day with all this group. And I was like, oh, fuck. And he came back and I was like, sayonara. I was just like, he's so much more in. Because of course there's the beginning where people come to this ceremony or they come to the things for a day or an afternoon and it's a surface thing. And then of course you do it more and more and there's the inner circle becomes more and more kind of special and smaller and this particular. And of course Ben is always not of course, but I know this. He's like this golden boy and he always becomes the special boy who people want or the man.
Look at him.
And he gets pinpointed. They're like, you're going to come with us in the inner circle. But yes, of course. And then when you're in that state, it's like so easy to get people to start believing they're also communicating with, with other things. And in all these groups, I've seen people who have mental issues to begin with. It's not good. Like we've seen casualties along the way. And it's that's a gnarly part because, it's sort of course, it can help people, of course, in certain ways, I guess, doing things. But some people, it's just not a safe space for certain. We've definitely lost a couple people.
Yeah, that's true.
No, for sure. The wake of these things have a lot of broken people.
Especially I find in Hollywood, I don't want to stereotype, but just from like trying to bring ESP there, I did see like so many people like people trying everything and then going too far, like you said. Even when you're just talking about Ben being chosen as like the special one and going to the inner circle, like I'm the same, by the way, Ben, in case you didn't catch that from the vow, but like that's intoxicating for certain people, not so much for Nippy. Nippy's like, wait, I need to work out. Can I work out when I'm in the inner circle? I'm just kidding.
I think also with psychedelics and how they play into this whole thing, it's not dissimilar to sex and art, that these are incredibly primal, ancient impulses within us. The urge to have sex, the urge to alter our consciousness, the urge to sing, to tell stories. Like these are what make us human at a prehistoric level, you know? And I think that in some ways we live in a world that's so disconnected from room to honor those impulses, that I think in some ways a cult that utilizes psychedelics well, they give their devotees or their members permission to do something that there isn't much room for in society, and it legitimizes it. It takes it out of hedonism and taking drugs and partying and like, this is the real way you're meant to do it. This is how you're real. And suddenly it's like, again, it's like, I see it as sort of like capture. Like, I think that what sort of good cult leaders do is they place themselves between an individual and their own experience of everythingness. You know what I mean? So like in a way, whatever you want to call it, like God or transcendence, like these are things that we each have access to on a daily level. But if you experience it in the presence of a guru who then tells you, you had that experience because you're with me.
Right.
Suddenly they've like claimed that part of you. So I think all these parts of us, like the psychedelic parts, the sexual parts, the artistic parts, the game of being a guru is learning how to capture and claim all these very private parts of people, and then they'll never leave.
Create the dependency and then say, don't be dependent on anything except for me. Normally we, take a cult because people were just in one, and we like do the deep dive and try to figure out all the red flags and talk about how people got out. But this is a different case, I think, with you both, because you've been in and out of so many. Did you ever actually like wake up and leave one, or did they sort of all overlap and you kind of got hooked in by another one that led you to the next?
Well, from the outside watching you, I think once you found Amma in India, it was...
This isn't the hugging Amma, it's a different Amma.
I was going to ask you about that. I know about the hugging one, but I don't know about this one.
Amma just means mother, so there's different gurus that embody the mother archetype.
Got it.
Yeah, and so I think that experience was so big that it sort of trumped the one in New York.
Yeah, well, what was interesting was it's a story. Like I see it played out as like there's a 3-act structure to it.
Right.
Whereas the Chinese energy master introduced me to the Hindu guru as an energy source. And I was like, wow, I respect this guy. If he's going there, I'm going there. Right. And then it became all encompassing. The ayahuasca freed me from the Hindu guru because I had a very intense experience where I saw the ways that I was trapped in this web of dependence on a human. And this is what's so trippy about it, that like the plant medicine gave me the insight to leave, but then the person who gave me the plant medicine trapped me again.
Got it.
On the way out, you know what I mean?
Right.
And then really at the end, but all of it is true. It is true what I saw. I was trapped and I did need to get out, but I wasn't ready. I guess it's like when someone leaves an abusive relationship and they just get in another one. But then the last one, honestly, it was very interesting what happened because the woman who'd introduced us to that group, she married the leader and then she was divorcing him.
Oh.
And she called us all one by one. And so that was kind of like I don't know, like, there's always one person who's like the whistleblower.
Yeah.
Well, she was our friend. And I was nervous because when you came back from that 5-day Shasta, and I was like, oh boy, with all this ayahuasca, it's like this is not looking good.
Mm-hmm.
And then you said, I realize, Amma, it's not good. And then I said, well, this was like, how do you know this isn't the same thing?
Right.
This sounds like just a different. And you were saying it's not. It's whatever you said. So our friend called and said a few years later, her husband was sleeping with, of course, the whole thing like turned out he was sleeping with other people and had tons of different wives already that she didn't know about. And she realized, and I thought, great. But then the leaders called an emergency meeting.
Oh, it was so amazing. This was so dramatic. So the leader and his wife are getting a divorce, right?
Yeah.
The leader knows that she's going around and telling everybody. So he calls.
And they were very mom and dad.
Yeah,
they were the father of the.
So we all go over there. She hears that this meeting's happening and she's like, if I don't show up, I'm about to get backstabbed, basically. Like, he's going to tell everybody I'm an apostate and the whole, you know what I mean?
Yeah, she's crazy.
She shows up and she walks in the door.
I wasn't at this meeting. I was just pacing at home.
And the leader, he spoke Spanish and he turned to her and he looks at her and he goes, competición.
She's this blonde from the Midwest. So beautiful.
So it was the very Star Wars moment. You know what I mean? And he sat down and started talking, and we were waiting for him to address what had happened, and he never did. And she just sat there like meditating. Like, imagine you're sitting at the feet of the husband you're leaving and you're destroying his business and the whole, you know what I mean? The whole thing. But so I was just kind of going, okay, all of this exploration I've done has surely been about finding out what my truth is, who I am. I just closed my eyes and I was like, what am I meant to do? And, I just felt this. To me, it was like words, but it was just a thought. But it was like, you can get off the bus here. That was what it was. It was like,
nice.
You can get off. You can get off. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't like some big enlightenment thing. It was like, you've been on a ride. This is a good moment to get off. They don't come that often.
I love that.
And I haven't been back to that kind of bus ride since.
This podcast wouldn't happen without our amazing, supportive, generous patrons. Are you with us? Come find us over on Patreon at patreon.com/a-little-bit-culty for bonus episodes, exclusive content, and the occasional Zoom with our fan favorites from our past episodes. It's a lot of fun over there, people.
The Frankies were a picture-perfect influencer family, but everything wasn't as it seemed.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here asking for help. He's emaciated. He's got tape around his legs. Ruby Frankie is his mom's name.
Infamous is covering Ruby Frankie, the world of Mormonism, and a secret therapy group that ruined lives. Listen to Infamous wherever you get your podcasts.
Meals bring people together, but for many families, providing their next meal can be a challenge. You can help by participating in Macy's annual Feeding the Hungry food drive. All proceeds go toward local food banks and families. Now through January 31st, you can purchase an icon in-store or online, or watch out for the blue Feeding the Hungry shelf tags, where a portion of your purchase will be donated to local pantries. Together, we can combat hunger in our local communities at Macy's.
Break time's over, people. Let's get back to this episode of A Little Bit Culty. It's a good one.
I actually have goosebumps because I feel like if our listeners, and a lot of our listeners are survivors of all sorts of different things, it doesn't have to be so dramatic. It doesn't have to be a big whistleblowing, New York Times extravaganza. It can just be like, okay, I'm going to get off the bus. But not everyone's so lucky, right? Other people are part of groups where, they could get hurt or stalked or excommunicated, all of those things. Like, it's easy for you to get off the bus.
Well, I only had an experience with a relationship. I was just thinking of like that mushroom experience with the nurse thing that was kind of similar to me.
Oh, yeah. I was I was with a drug addict, and it was really hard not to be worried about him, like so worried all the time. And I was so caught up. I just felt, I had that thing. I have to take care of him.
Right.
I have to. I was young. And then I had one of those moments of like, this isn't your job. Like, you're not a nurse. You don't need to do this. And it was a moment of clarity. But yeah, I mean, we weren't going to lose our family. Like we lucked out. Like we didn't, sure, we didn't give a lot of money. I mean, we went to India a lot, which was expensive, but some people helped build a temple for Amma, or brought their kids, and one kid was sick and then just didn't go to the doctor because Alma was like, there's certain situations. But I mean, I did feel alienated. I alienated myself from others, but because thinking I have these answers and they don't. We weren't in those terrible situations where you might get hurt physically or you might lose family members if you leave or, luckily everyone was like, yay, I'm so glad you're not doing that anymore.
It's a really weird process because it's show business is, follows the same rules where like windows of opportunity are actually really narrow.
Right.
They're really small. And like, I'm a really big proponent of just timing being everything and just in life, just seizing because I've had certain things like in my career where I've missed opportunities because of timing and they sort of don't come back again. They might come back in a different way, but I do know enough to know that if you see like a little crack of light coming through and you're in a dark place, every time you don't jump and go for it, it gets a little harder.
Right.
Like you gotta seize those opportunities. And that's really what I felt and so I have regrets about
work, like your career a little bit. Like
my career took a hit because but by the same token, I started at 14. So I didn't go to college. I prematurely chose a career before any of my peers. So I also think I kind of earned the right to fuck around for a decade and kind of experiment with other things before now as an adult and as a man, I feel like so locked into my value system.
Right.
I'm a little nervous about anything that feels culty whatsoever. So I don't know, like, I guess that's, who knows if I'll relax a little, but I don't ever want to do any, even yoga class. Like I'm just
people
scared.
are like, come to this doctor, he's amazing. And it's obviously like he doesn't have a PhD and he can analyze everything in one. I was like, the way you're talking about this guy is like, I'm not going.
Yeah, I want a straightforward. I believe in teachers. Like if someone was, we have a tennis teacher or whatever. If I want to learn a language, like, they're teachers, but they're not trying to like take over my life.
Yeah. One thing we've been saying to people is like, take the tools, put them in your life. Don't make the tools your life. That's the line. Don't dedicate yourself to any one person thing.
Also, I'm not sure that there's any one set of tools that the thing about tools is that you need lots and lots of them and they can all be different and you can draw on. Like there are times when what gets me through my day is an intense faith in that there's some greater meaning. There's other times when almost like a staunch atheism and a self-determination is what gets me through my day.
That's cool.
And I don't think there's those are totally different tools and I use both of them. So it's just good to kind of make it all part of you.
So of all the groups that you've been in, what's the wisdom you're taking away? Like if you could quantify of all the three groups, what are the abuses that they do that you caught and what could you take from your experience and put it into a wisdom content point for people that you noticed?
It's funny because I'm not as focused on the abuses because I sort of see and I get that that's sort of a privileged situation of not having, people suffer all kinds of different things. But just in my personal situation, I almost see these gurus as also being victims of a total confusion about what good values are and what love is and what meaning is. So I view it more as like one of the biggest lessons that came out for me is an intense trust in my wife because she, the whole time, she says she'd go in and out, but she was out a lot through all these different things and was always like, Ben, I don't know. And like, that's friendship to me. That's someone who, if she ever says to me, Ben, I don't know, it doesn't mean I'm not going to argue back. And sometimes, who knows who's right. But I really came to trust her insight into it. I also came to really see how hard it was for me to trust my own uniqueness, which is basically about being in a little boat out on a very rough ocean. And that's just reality. It's dangerous. Sorry, all of these places we go to find security, that's a nice feeling, but it's not real. It's an illusion of security, an illusion of enlightenment, an illusion of family. It took me a long time to grow up into being okay with the chaos of life and with the chaos of my own impulses too. And as far as all these clowns, that are running these shops, they're like, I just look at them as like they're really stuck. They're like super stuck, and they always end up a prisoner of what they create, whether they end up in jail or end up having to run a cult. I mean, is there anything worse? Can you imagine your whole life? You can never leave these compounds and everyone's watching you all the time. I mean, it's so annoying. So I think they are victims of their own creations, and they're kind of a bunch of losers. Like that to me, they're not the kind of people I really want to have over for dinner. And I'm not interested in them as people once you take off their pedestal type thing.
That's so funny to say, because back when you were viewing them as
superhuman,
you just want nothing more than to be near them and them give you attention. But yeah, it's like a lot of people wanting the community part, it's sort of sweet, but it's definitely just misguided. I mean, people liking that feeling of being in this world together.
I love that feeling. That's the only thing I miss. But Ione, you've obviously done some things right to be by Ben's side and doubt enough that he would trust you and yet not push him away with your own concerns. What advice do you have for people who have a loved one who they're not on the same page with?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely we would fight quite a bit, and I would say you were so staunch when you were in it that, I mean, I wasn't there.
A lot of lawyers in my family. So it's like, debating me is not fun because I'm very.
I know. I would read like a Scientology book and just like have a complete panic attack and just be like, Ben, how is this different to that? How is this different? And you just would point out, well, it's different because of this. It's different because of that. But I had a therapist at one point and she said, well, is he showing up as a father? Is he showing up in his work and you always were kind of amazing at maintaining like your job. And although I don't know, I think it's just a lot of patience, but I did trust you. I mean, what he was referring to before was when it started to get dicey for me because of the one sacred marriage one got very heterosexual. Like the last one, it was about sacred marriage, and it was getting very kind of, even though we're Jewish, it was very Christian or something. And then when he was talking to my 13-year-old about like,
and just getting homophobic.
Yeah, just like what the right type of sacred sexuality is. I was like, no. You're not talking, just step off like this. And that's when I was really like, back off. You're not going to tell a budding, person's but what's right sexually.
But what's interesting about it, and this isn't a defense of that at all, that's always wrong, I think, to indoctrinate your children into any religion. But me and Kate, my stepdaughter, actually have always had a very strong philosophical bond of like talking through ideas, like reading Waiting for Godot together when she was little.
I mean, it wasn't creepy. Like it was more like just too
but it was
Christian.
Not boundaried. It was not appropriate.
Yes.
And that's the kind of thing that cults, you just lose all sense of what's actually appropriate boundaried adult.
They push on those.
Yeah. And you believe you're doing the right thing. Like his point of view.
You think you're doing the best thing you could possibly do, which is giving someone information that they need.
Yeah. That they're, you see a lot of very religious families as well. I'm sure they believe, I think, I would like to think that they think it's a good thing they're doing, even though I don't agree with it. But it took many years for me to believe you weren't going to just go into another one.
I'll never forget the day when I really left everything. I had two thoughts that I remember in my head. One was I'd heard the term living amends. I'm not in AA or anything, but I'd heard that. And I that really resonated with me, that there is nothing I can say in this moment that's going to mean shit. Like I'm going to have to earn this trust back over years with Ione and with Kate. And I felt that very cleanly in me. I was like, okay, just don't even talk about this. Don't even say all the ways you're going to be different. Just be different. So that's one thought I remember. And the other was, I want my art back. Right. I want my career back. I want to put that number one and just be kind of like, as opposed to thinking that's some superficial thing, being like, I'm an artist. Like I'm here to express myself. I want to get focused again. And so those things really drove me through the healing kind of.
Yeah, the last one was all the things you take in were very through a lens. Like the music it started getting very paranoid in a weird way. Like,
yeah, well, everything has to be positive and for God, and everything's for God.
Yeah, and no swearing and no this. So it was just getting smaller and smaller.
This is the ayahuasca Christian.
Yeah. The only reason we're not super big on like naming all these things is like basically people end up Googling and they can get into it.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to create any kind of even like a subconscious sales funnel for any of these groups because I always like to keep it about
That's good.
my experience. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The process.
I think we kind of screwed up on that one with our podcast because we've definitely done the opposite.
I think naming is fine.
I think it's fine. I've nothing against it. Just personally, I don't think there's anything added. Say with the Hindu guru, I have no secret. I'm happy to tell you their name, but I'm also just like, why drive web traffic?
No, I think that's a good point.
You know what I mean? Like all I'm going to do is give someone's going to end up selling some show to Netflix that I'm not going to participate in.
Well, speaking of which, I mean, if you haven't thought about this already, that scene that you described with the competition and the face off with the wife, and that's you can't write that shit. Like that's brilliant. Please put that into a show. I'm sure you know some people.
You do see a lot of like crazy psychological things, you know.
You're both so creative and you have this incredible production company. I mean, not that you have a ton of free time, but I'd watch that. Just putting it up there.
Yeah, well, Ione's writing her memoir.
Yes, how's that going?
It's good. It's all consuming, but it's been very interesting. Yeah.
You have always been more into cults of one.
Yeah. I'm more in the love addiction category probably, where you just make one person.
You're a joiner with one, not a joiner of a group.
Yeah.
So how did you get out of that dynamic and heal from it?
I mean, I think it's just still a lifelong thing. I think I'm still, even being we have a very good, I'd say really, really good marriage. Like Ben's going on tour for a while and it's always an adjustment to like find my own life and my own mind and what do I like to do? Because I tend to kind of, lose my own whatever compass. So I even still now now I feel in a good place and I don't know. Of course, getting older, that helps a lot too. Just feeling more competent and how to take care of myself and everything. But I mean, I had one really hairy young relationship with this drug addict, and I was like, notice this. This is intense. Like, why are you staying in this? And so that was a huge wake up call. Having, the only good thing about having such a kind of gnarly first boyfriend was that it was not subtle. Like I took notice, like don't do this. Cause I knew somewhere that sometimes people they repeat over and over. And so I sort of didn't do that. But even with a healthy, lovely, supportive person, I still have a tendency to kind of become like infantile. And also I'm an actress. I think actresses like to be the baby and, just like people do everything for them, but that's not so bad.
That could be worse. Will your memoir cover some of this culty dabbling?
Yeah, it's very interesting because the proposal it touched on it, but it's so big and it's such a huge. So the editors and publishers I was meeting with were like more or less. It's actually just like more or not any of it. I guess you can't have like one paragraph like and I was in 3 cults kind of, or you have to either take it out or put it in. So yeah, I'm gonna take a stab at writing about it, but it's also very comical. So the way I wrote about it was there is a lot of funny stuff about it, but so I'm going to see if it comes out well, then I'll keep it in. If not, we'll scrap the whole thing.
Thumbs up from us to keep it in, obviously.
Yes. Yeah.
What about culty dynamics that you see in Hollywood or the music industry? Like now that you're both veterans of these structures, do you see it? Do you feel it in different ways?
Yeah, I reckon for sure. I mean, look, there's also like those funny good things, this skill set you learned. Like I learned a lot about building community through cults. I also learned a lot about hard work and consistency.
Unpaid hard work.
Yeah, exactly. So in some ways, like some of those things I carry forward, but it's interesting. Like Rick Rubin wrote a book about creativity that came out this year and so many musicians loved it. I really didn't like it. I also really don't like David Lynch talking about TM so much. And basically, people admire David Lynch, and David Lynch's creativity was amazing long before TM. But he, in his mind, he's constructed a narrative where TM is responsible for all of the amazing unconscious material that he's dug up. And I don't know him personally. I've met him once, but I don't agree with that. I just believe that that's who he is. So those are kind of examples where I see people in positions of power who aren't necessarily like running cults, but they are sort of indoctrinating young creative people into dependence on ritual and dogmatic thinking that I think is like pretty destructive.
And even like we have a young friend who's come in from Australia, and her manager is something like she's stopped kind of listening to what she wants to do and is only doing every meeting is just, oh, I have to do that because my manager, and it's fine. Like that's great. And as far as I don't know, I guess there's always, you view people as knowing how to do things that you don't know how to do. And I don't know. But do you guys think in the movie, but in different industries, there's a similarity sometimes?
It's hard for me. It's sort of the lens that I see everything through now is not like, oh, that's a cult, but it's like that dynamic is unhealthy. It's toxic power structures. I mean, there's lots of things I've seen in Hollywood with Weinstein and Me Too. And, these things have been going on. The casting couch has been going on for years, decades. How do you dismantle that? I have no idea. I personally don't like it. I'm happy to be away from it right now. I've never been in the music industry, but I have heard about like networks sort of holding people by the balls and like strapping people into things that we haven't done an episode on it, but I'd like to do an episode on that. For more background on what brought us here, check out my page-turning memoir. It's called Scarred, the true story of how I escaped NXIVM, the cult that bound my life. It's available on Amazon, Audible, and at most bookstores. And if you want to see that story in streaming form, you can watch both seasons of The Vow on HBO.
Meals bring people together, but for many families, providing their next meal can be a challenge. You can help by participating in Macy's annual Feeding the Hungry food drive. All proceeds go toward local food banks and families. Now through January 31st, you can purchase an icon in-store or online, or watch out for the blue Feeding the Hungry shelf tags, where a portion of your purchase will be donated to local pantries. Together, we can combat hunger in our local communities at Macy's.
Break time's over, people. Let's get back to this episode of A Little Bit Culty. It's a good one.
Also, the industries aren't particularly set up for your success in as much as I want to show up. A lot of other hierarchies or whatever have somewhat of a distinct path. If I do these things and hit these benchmarks, I can earn my way up into a hierarchy. And creative industries generally don't have that. So oftentimes you're going to have, quote, talent dependent on people who have way more power than them. And those people are always going to abuse their power, some more than others. And you're, I think, lucky if you don't run into that, and you have to have a strong moral compass to understand when it's going on. And then the people who don't have that strong moral compass might find themselves susceptible to someone who's leveraging their power for someone's career. And that's ultimately what I think you find with the casting couch and stuff like that. And there's always going to be someone willing to do it.
I think also the lack of strict, known, laid out direction makes people susceptible to thinking, are there shortcuts? Are there?
Yes.
But the one thing I would say is that it's important to recognize that life is a violent game and it's a dangerous game, and there are no real safe spaces. And families have very complicated dynamics that are psychologically dangerous, and every school and every institution has them. And it's almost like we can't be so idealistic that we end up withdrawing from all of these landscapes and all of these playgrounds because of the risk involved. They are Hollywood, the music industry, doing professional sports, working at a bank.
Yeah.
These are psychological minefields, all of them. And I think it's more about what you were saying, like learning to recognize dynamics and participate on your own terms with boundaries, knowing how much you're willing to compromise, how much you're not.
But some people aren't in that position. They get stuck in a job or like being coming in at the bottom or being a woman. And if you're in, it's just nice to uncover just the corruption or the power.
agree, yeah.
I mean, it's nice if everyone can get to that place where they can trust their judgment and stand up for themselves.
I get it. I just sort of feel that like part of the reason I don't really feel that victimized by the cults I was in was that I do genuinely feel I truly was a willing participant in something quite dark, that I was looking for a shortcut. That's on me. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, someone was selling me one, but hey, I was buying. I wanted a shortcut. And I liked all these charismatic people who seemed to have things figured out. And I wanted what they had, So I just sort of feel that like I am really lucky. There was not sexual abuse or physical violence towards me, but you know what I mean? So I say that from the perspective of, there's a privilege in that of my own journey, but I also feel that like I was in a dance with these dark people. I wanted what they had, and it took me some real exploring before I figured out I don't want what they have.
It's definitely been a big part of my journey as well. It's taken me 6 years to own all the things, not just community and belonging. No, I was looking for external validation. I was looking to feel special.
But do you feel you were coerced in any way? Meaning you signed up for one thing and found out that wasn't really what they were selling?
Yes, but I feel that in so many areas of my life. I mean, very rarely are things what they appear to be.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I see that type of duplicity or those hard lessons about reality as sort of being implicit.
Well, also, if the leaders of these things really believe, that's the thing. Did Amma really believe she was an avatar, or was she just, saying that to have followers believe she was?
Yeah, like how confused are they?
It's more sinister, of course, if they're like, wow, these people are believing this.
That's the question. Do you feel it was calculated on their part? Like, did they intentionally go out fronting a persona that they knew wasn't true or they believed was true?
I think there's something pure at the beginning of most of these things.
And then they get caught. Well, remember like Father Yod or whatever, when there was, remember the Father Yod, the family, the source. And he, at one point, they're like in Hawaii, and it's like very much later.
They're all
and
doing mushrooms.
They're doing mushrooms, and Father Yod says, I don't know if I'm really God. I think I might. And all the followers are like, no, you are. Like they were like panicking there. But he was like, yeah, I don't know if he was sort of questioning it for a second.
I mean, being a guru, it's probably like the journey at the beginning of wanting to be a rock star or something, where you have to be a little delusional to get the path started, because you're talking about building something so improbable that you need that like mad, like, what it was her name, Elizabeth Theranos. You need that kind of like, I could build it. I could be the one. And in a way, some of that's healthy to achieve great things. But there's a point along the line, like say with Theranos, where she saw that it wasn't working and she continued to sell because she was all in. And I think a lot of these gurus are so all in by the time they put it together that there are real flaws to what they're doing that they kind of can't back out. Mm-hmm. I mean, I heard a story, this is all kind of bullshit because I don't really believe it happens like this, but I heard that Yogi Bhajan was asked about Sai Baba once, and someone said, a student said, what do you think about Sai Baba? And he said, I don't believe he is who he says he is, which I thought was like a very interesting insight from one narcissistic cult leader about another one. You know what I mean? That like, in a way, it was about that. It was like, is there intentional deceit happening, or is he confused? Does he say he's something, but he's not that?
I think there's both. I think with Keith Raniere, it's intentional deceit. I think we haven't deep dived to Bhajan, but there's a lot of people who actually do believe they are who they say they are. And maybe it's mental illness, or maybe it's delusions of grandeur, or vulnerable narcissism, or whatever else is being thrown around these days and overused.
Back to the Theranos one. That one's an interesting one because Theranos, I believe, if I remember the documentary correctly, cited Thomas Edison as the kind of fake it till you make it. And Thomas Edison kept failing. And finally, Thomas Edison was successful in what he was saying, but he had been lying previously. But because the end justifies the means, he ended up getting the result. Theranos saw that model as something that she could emulate for her vision, but she ultimately got caught in the process. I think that was her justification. So had she achieved what she set out to do, right, genuinely, we would be talking about Theranos as someone maybe in the ilk of Thomas Edison because of the model that she emulated.
That's exactly it. That's it. Like, I feel like for me as an artist, I'm like finally in my 40s becoming the artist and the business person and that I thought I could be when I started at 14. And that's a very long journey. It's taken me 30 years to become almost as good as I always thought I was. Not quite there. But the problem is, if you're a guru, you're playing with people's lives in the experimentation process.
Yeah, but you're not being deceitful about that. You're transparent about that. You're not being deceitful about it. In your case, Ben, there's standards and measurements to actually quantify if you are the person that you say you are. You're not blurring those lines.
Sort of, except with art, an artist, it's kind of like just a vibe too.
Proof is in how many people are.
No, but that's true on a commercial level, but not at a level of like artistic respect.
That's probably true, yeah.
Say like Lou Reed or the Velvet Underground,
sure.
Classic example of artists that sold a lot less tickets or records than the influence they had because everyone just felt it was good. People that knew, you know what I mean? So I've never really, certainly I've never claimed to be like a Michael Jackson. Like, the proof is in the numbers. Like, if you look at the numbers, I am a moderately successful musician. But I've always believed in my heart I had something to offer creatively of greatness, So that's totally could just be my imagination. I don't know. That's why it's tricky. That's why it's dangerous.
It is interesting when people get caught, and there's certain personality types like Trump or Russell Brand or something that when they really believe in conspiracies or I don't know, you can get followers that will believe you're being victimized.
Right.
I guess like Keith Raniere is similar, like they're feeling that they're victimized and the world is, I don't know, it's just like these people become untouchable for a while. Some sort of powerful people who may start to get in trouble can be untouchable if they sort of convince people that they're victims.
Right.
And I was just saying the two cults sort of that we were in and out of, both people are still going, but there were a lot of people who left, which were I think you've had that too. It's such a satisfying part when people start leaving, like the letters and the...
we said our favorite literary trend of that year were the exit letters. Of any cult. When they start coming out, you're just like, bring it on.
It's like mother's milk. It's just
like a new episode of Real Housewives.
You're just like, this is the best. Because it's so nice to see people snapping out of it.
Yeah. We call it waking up. And there's still people waking up out of the NXIVM stupor, if you can believe it.
Yeah, we have some friends that are like sort of starting to kind of teach. Like they're becoming mini spin-offs.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
And do you just hold the chorus and be there for them and be a safe landing pad?
Well, Ben brought a lot of people into both of them because he's very persuasive. So you were always very good at getting people in, but you never felt that guilty about it. I mean, luckily these ones weren't. Luckily it wasn't, like I said, like some people put money in and sure they like sort of stopped their lives, I guess, but luckily nothing was too tragic.
To quote Sean Penn from Rolling Stone magazine in 1987, I have regrets that there are no statutes of limitations. But yeah, bringing people into cults, it sucks, but at the end of the day, aside from committing to not doing that type of thing again, and being willing to accept the karma and consequences of that type of behavior, there's not a lot you can do. And everyone does have their own. I know I've made it very clear to everybody involved in any of these groups, much like with Bonnie, they can reach out to me. Mm-hmm. I've made myself a person. That's part of my amends.
Yeah.
I've waved my flag very clearly and said, hey, if you're thinking about getting out of one of these groups, talk to me. I'll support you. And that's part of how I can make up for it, hopefully somewhat.
Yeah. And your powers of persuasion can work in that direction.
Yeah. For good, not evil.
That's really important. And also, like, do your research. I always tell people, like, go online. Where there's smoke, there's fire. If there's allegations, it's probably true. It's probably true. There's something there to look at. And also, I think it's great that you can use your platform to call out things. Like, you were one of the first people to make the parallels between QAnon and culty dynamics. What's that journey been like as a friendly whistleblower?
Yeah, I mean, that was really interesting watching this overlap happen between the New Age community and essentially, nationalists, a right wing. I was really disturbed because I felt a certain type of kinship with like this world of yoga teachers and organic foods. And I just sort of, I don't know, I thought it was like their hearts were in the right place. And then it's complicated to talk about now because this all feels actually like history, that what happened over that period. It was particularly interesting when Black Lives Matter started coming up into the consciousness. That was the first time I really saw that there was a certain type of white wellness person who seemed to be saying that was a psyop of some kind. So they had arguments that I guess basically it was distracting us from the COVID lockdowns and there was all this money being poured into BLM. I don't know anything about any of that. All I know is that I grew up watching Spike Lee movies and believing that America has the ability to face a racial reckoning and actually take accountability for itself and its mistakes. And I welcomed that dialogue coming into the mainstream. To me, that felt super positive. And that was the first time I felt this real split where I saw that, like, wow, all these hippie friends in Topanga and Ojai are against BLM and and I was like, what is going on? So it was really that. And then what I started seeing was that it was a total cult dynamic where there was special information that was coming from a magical source, these Q posts, and people were interpreting it and they could interpret it to mean whatever they wanted to mean. So to me, it just felt very much like these ayahuasca journeys and the masters are telling you this and you're getting the messages you want to get. And what I essentially saw was that the messages these people wanted to get was about America not making progress, but actually reverting back to a time like the 1950s that was incredibly white and probably an incredibly nice place to live if you were in a very small segment of the socioeconomic landscape.
If you sat down some of our friends that we've sort of lost a couple along the way, and they would say, no, I watch these YouTube or this is what I believe. Like they might not put it together. Like I lost a very good friend and she kept saying, it's not political. And I was saying, it's very political. She wasn't understanding.
Yeah, that's right. I'll tell you the biggest overlap that to me felt really dangerous was when you have a guru, you basically believe, much like the royal family, that there is, what's the term? Not ordination, like when something's touched by God.
Ordained.
Ordained. Yeah, you sort of believe that God chooses leaders for the world and for the community, and our job is to honor and support them. And that's kind of what a guru is, right? That is also what Christian nationalists basically want America to be like. They want God to choose the leader. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's not to me. That's anti-democratic.
Right.
Like, I don't believe in groups where there is a non-democratic method of electing leadership. And essentially, that is the space that the hippies and the Christians and the fascists all overlapped, which is basically being anti-democratic. And to me, that felt incredibly dangerous. I don't love a lot of the political leaders, whether they're here or in Australia. They do seem very outdated to me, and they're certainly not perfect solutions. But I absolutely do not want someone channeling answers for who's meant to be the leader of America or Australia. To me, that type of craziness, keep it in the cults. Keep it in the cults.
Did you watch Shiny Happy People?
Yeah. Wait, what was that again?
The Duggar family and about IBLP.
We've seen them all.
Yeah, us too. We're like crazy people for this shit. But that's the first time Nippy and I were like, oh my goodness, they're actively training these people to get into positions of power in the government. And they do believe they have a direct line to God, which is one of our red flags. Like, oh yeah, I'm speaking to God or Jesus. Jesus told me, blah, 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 blah.
Listen, I mean, Karl Marx said it best, that democracy won't be destroyed from any outside force, and it'll be done by dividing us through identity politics. And you have to be careful about putting on the hats of one side and then assuming that you have the answers, because that is in a lot of ways doing it. And it's pretty obvious, I think, when religions do it. It's less obvious when people hide behind the moral superiority of a movement, but really they leverage that movement to accelerate a clandestine agenda. And what you often find is you're unwittingly aligned with a group of people that, wait a minute. I'm not interested in the violent aspect of it. I'm interested in the principles of democracy, the principles of equality. What are you talking about with how you're going about it? And sometimes it's a little too late to do that. And I think what's been going on in the last 5-6 years is people are putting on these uniforms, and that feels a little culty. And I find not really, on both sides, they don't really fit. And the one that I found fits a little bit more is a little bit left-leaning, because it feels like it has more progress. And I'm seeing behaviors come out of a group of people that identify more with, that are like, hey, we don't need to use those tactics to do this. We need to root them and moor them in our principles and speak from that place. And it seems like everyone's in the pigsty right now, unfortunately, slinging mud.
Well, look, the issue of like with politics, I mean, you know, in Australia, we're going through this referendum at the moment about recognize Indigenous people in the Constitution. So it's a massive...
They're not recognized?
They're not at the moment, but there's a referendum coming about enshrining them in the Constitution, which is like common sense.
Yeah. I'm surprised they're not.
Dude, watching the way that politics the way parties have politicized this, and that it's become about so much other stuff. I'm not that personally optimistic about political solutions to the larger issues.
I agree. I totally agree.
I know for sure I'm not leaving it up to God, churches, channels, mediums. That's a hard no.
You don't have to go too far in our history to figure out that they don't have the solution. So I'm with you on that.
Or essential oils.
Exactly. There you go, too.
Which, by the way, I barely missed that boat as well. So no judgment.
Well, that came from one of the cults. Like, we basically got involved in that.
Which one?
Through the ayahuasca cult.
Yeah.
That became a way we were all, because you start giving so much of your time to the cult that you need income too. So there was this idea of, hey, let's all do this together, and everyone's in each other's downline.
And also it started like giving the money to charity for, like Tibetan monks, and then some Peruvian charity. And of course, it all sounds amazing. It's like, oh, okay, we're helping, whatever, like kids and this and that. But I was never good again. I was so bad at and embarrassed to be selling. But Ben is so good at business or something. That was
like my business school. Like I was in an MLM for a few years, and I actually learned about mentoring. I learned about, consistency, about team building. The thing I hated about that cult-like business structure is that there's actually no room for personal freedom of entrepreneurship or expression, because it's all based on repetition, or what are they called? Duplication is the term. So it's actually a super uncreative form of business.
Oh, yeah.
I know, it's so funny.
So it's so bad. It's so bad.
And even there was like one sort of class about massaging with the oils. And it's so funny because it was like a structure, there is a way to learn, I guess, massage, but it was like it wasn't a good massage. And then I gave like a couple friends this massage because it was like too light, and it just was like, and all my instincts were like, just give your friend a massage.
It's just an excuse to sell the oils.
But I was just like, this massage they're peddling is not good.
Oh, God.
And again, no judgment. Is not in my book and stuff because I still have family in the MLM. But I was in an MLM before I did Nexium. And like Ben, I was also very good at selling and recruiting, and learned all those skills. And that's what made me such a star recruiter for Nexium. So
yeah, I heard, the wife, our friend who was the wife of the cult leader who left, she said when she was making sense of the whole thing, she did say something to me that really stuck with me. She said, all about sneaking in, getting the gold and sneaking out. And I sort of think that like there is an old Buddhist expression, I think, that the thief is actually better suited to the spiritual path than the saint. And I think there is something about that because there's chutzpah, you know, like all of these spaces that we've passed through, they're like dangerous, murky, complicated spaces. But there are skills we learned. There are hard lessons we learned. There are dark things we witnessed that are cautionary tales. And life is about you find yourself in these spaces, you learn the lessons, you get the fuck out of these spaces.
I love this. This is like one of my favorite conversations because it's, I don't know, I feel like it's therapeutic and hilarious and learning all at the same time.
Well, we try and have a light. You know, you got to laugh. Like,
oh, yeah.
When I said living amends, the only way, I remember we were with our friend Daphne and like, I can't remember, we'd all had some drinks and a group of friends were asking me all these questions about the cults. And I was just making them laugh because of how hard I was laughing about all of these various moments. And someone said, that's healing.
Yeah.
That's like what healing looks like when you can laugh.
Absolutely.
Because it's like, we're humans. We get involved in dumb shit.
We totally do. We totally do. And if you ever want to start a support group, just the four of us and a couple other people, no leaders.
I know. I was looking forward to it because it is a unique thing that unless you've been there, you don't understand. Because of course, if you're not like from the outside, you think, how could people do that? That's so weird, or what was wrong with them? And but when you know what that hook is and what it feels like to get in, it's specific, and it's nice to talk to other people who understand.
Yeah.
It demystifies it.
I definitely have found that here as being like new in Atlanta. The people that I've kind of got the closest to already have seen the vow, had a similar whatever, whether it's a one-on-one or a group. And they're like, I get it. I see you. I hear you. I'm like, okay, we can start from there. Not like, oh, so what's your podcast all about? And I'm like, oh God, here we go again. I got to start from the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, I realize that this is way more than an hour. Obviously, we have lots to talk about, but what do you want people to know now about your podcast? What are you doing? Tell us all the things.
So, you know, we both make our own work. I make lots of music. Ione acts and paints and directs. And so we're both doing our projects, but we also run a company together called Weirder Together. And we put out podcasts. Like we have a twice weekly podcast, Jello Biafra from Dead Kennedys, an amazing artist called Brock Enright. There's a great married couple of artists called Raw Impressions, Lou and Adele Barlow. So we put out those pods. We also release music. We also have been hosting events. It's kind of like just this creative incubator that we share and we put out, and we've been saying we make stuff, curate stuff, and celebrate stuff. It's just being creative. That's something we do together.
Yeah. Yeah. We've started sort of hosting kind of launch, house party concerts for bands. And it's like the way the music industry is that people put out one song sometimes at a time. And it's not it's like people still have albums, but it's nice to have a place where we put out, like if someone has one song. So that's been kind of exciting.
I miss albums.
Yeah, I know. Albums are the best.
You're lucky.
But yeah, and we, I'm writing the memoir, which is great because of the strike going on. I keep thinking, am I allowed to write? And I'm like, okay, it's a memoir. I keep feeling like I'm crossing the line. Yeah, so we're just still doing our thing and diversifying a bit, but we're still here in Hollywood.
I love it. I love that all the things that you're doing, and it's, like I said, such a treat to have a conversation with people who get it and reflect a little bit. I learned some things today, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Please keep in touch. Thank you guys so much for your time. You're both awesome, and we wish you all the best in your beautiful, creative, totally weird endeavors.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Back at you. Goodbye. Thank you.
Peace.
Like what you hear, do you? Give us a rating, a review, and subscribe on iTunes. Every little bit helps us get this cult awareness content out there. Smash that subscribe button. You know you want to.
Well, thank you, everybody. I hope I stayed calm and cool during that interview. I'm a big fan, especially of the...
You were calm and cool.
Was I?
Yeah.
You can reach out to Ben and Ione directly. We'll put all their information in our show notes as per usual. Check out Weirder Together. Check them out on Instagram, Ben Lee Music, Ione Skye Lee, and let us know what you thought of the episode. Till next time.
Till next time what?
I don't know. Don't join a cult. Bye.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean. I'm hanging on to the
Thanks for listening, everyone. We're heading over to patreon.com/a-little-bit-culty now to discuss this episode. In the meantime, dear listener, please remember, this podcast is solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. It's not intended as a substitute for real medical, legal, or therapeutic advice. For cult recovery resources and to learn more about seeking safely in this culty world, check out a-little-bit-culty.com/culty resources, and don't miss Sarah's TED Talk called How Cult Literate Are You? Great stuff.
A Little Bit Culty is a Trace 120 production, executive produced by Sarah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames, in collaboration with producer Will Rutherford at Citizens of Sound and our co-creator and show chaplain/bodyguard, Jess Temple Tardy. Our show writer is Holly Zadra, and our theme song, Cultivated, is by John Bryant.